Hello, and welcome to the Black Ordinary podcast, a monthly conversation about Black art, Black archives, and Black autonomy. My name is Kaitlyn B. Jones, and I'm your host, and I'm the proud founder of the Black Ordinary Project, a multimedia platform, resource hub, and national database of community-based archives and community-based archival projects dedicated to preserving Black American history and culture. This podcast is one of the many ways that the project platforms Black artists, Black community members, Black scholars, Black archivists, anybody Black who is doing necessary work to preserve the collective memories of Black America. For this first episode, I am so excited to be in conversation with Nasir Anthony Montalvo, who I met at the Kansas City art scene a few years ago. Nasir Anthony Montalvo is an award-winning journalist and memory worker based in Kansas City, Missouri. Montalvo's practice involves archival science, digital media, popular education, and the written word to move Black diasporic audiences towards life and a true dream beyond platitudes. Montalvo currently holds a 2-year writing residency at Charlotte Street and is supported by local, national, and international organizations, including the Opportunity Agenda, Diaspora Solidarities Lab, and the Solutions Journalism Network, all which provide financing, mentorship, and resources. Montalvo and their work has been published in 60 Inches from Center, The Advocate, NPR, Teen Vogue, Cosmopolitan, Hello Giggles, and Casey Studio. Montalvo is most recently the founder of BQKC, an archive of Black queer Midwestern history, building power across Black queer generations, accessible storytelling through digital media and artistic installations, and fighting fascist indoctrination in Missouri. Montalvo is queer, Afro-Boricua, and originally from Kissimmee, Florida. I hope you enjoy our conversation. If anything resonates with you, please feel free to put it in the comments below and keep the conversation going. Without further ado, here's our conversation. I want to kick off this episode with a segment that I want to call Extraordinarily Ordinary. The Black Ordinary Project and this podcast celebrates everyday Black people whose existence is a living testament to Black American community, Black American culture, and Black American history, even if their names didn't make it into the history books. And so I want to give you the floor. Please speak a name and tell a story. All yours.
Yeah, I'll talk about someone from the archive, BQKC. This person's name is Craig Lovingood, more commonly known in the community as Tisha Taylor. Tisha Taylor is a legendary Black drag queen in Kansas City in the underground ballroom scene. Tisha is a drag queen and a pageant contestant. And winner, multi-winner. She began performing in her drag persona Tisha in the 1990s and competing for titles in 1992. And I really love Tisha's story because I think Tisha talks a lot about beauty and what it means to be beautiful, and like her not feeling beautiful like as Craig Lovingood, like her, I guess, regular person, but feeling gorgeous as Tisha Taylor and having to reconcile with that and what that means. But she began performing in 1992 and won several pageant competitions since then. She won Miss Gay Kansas City in 1995, Miss Central Missouri in 1995, Miss Nebraska USA when she used to live there in 1995, and also placed highly in several other local pageant competitions. And in 1997, she founded her own pageant production company called Taylortown Productions, where she founded her own pageant competition called Miss Black Gay Pride, where a large part of the ethos around that pageant was making sure that not only she could provide the coaching and the mentorship that Black queer people needed in the community to be able to feel beautiful and like they could enter a pageant, but also create a pageant competition where beauty wasn't viewed through a white lens. It was viewed specifically through a Black queer lens. But also she's talked about how there were rigorous, I guess, standards to be met by the judges, where judges weren't coming into the pageant and coming in with their own conceptions of what beauty meant to them, and just were expected to judge the competition based on how well the girls presented themselves in their own way, if that makes sense. But Tisha Taylor, beyond just being a drag queen, has created immense progress for the Black queer community in Kansas City. She founded Kansas City's first ever Black Gay Pride in 1999 in August, and since then, Black Gay Pride has been an annual celebration, as it is in many other cities. But she started the one in Kansas City. And she was also instrumental in founding Kansas City's first and only Black gay bar, Soki's, in downtown Kansas City in 93. And that bar shut down, unfortunately, due to gentrification in 2004. But Tisha Taylor, Craig Lovingood has been a really, really awesome, cool person to meet in the community. I think they're really down to earth, but also keeps it super real and blunt. And I just love that. And I hope that this story of Tisha is like fun and exciting and tells a little bit about Black queer history in Kansas City.
Absolutely. And so they're still alive, correct?
Yes, still alive.
Yeah. And that is important to clarify, because a lot of times we talk about Black history as being so far behind us, but we have living legends and living icons that we are absolutely supposed to be in community with while they're still here on this plane. So yeah, that's incredible. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, of course. And I'm really glad you brought up that she's still alive, because a lot of BQKC, it's a living archive.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the research that I've done, the people are still here, are elders. And considering the subject matter I deal with, and the time period that I've been researching, which is the 80s and 90s, and how much communities across the US and Kansas City, the globe, suffered because of the AIDS pandemic, it's even more precious to be able to have elders who are here that we can speak to. And so, yeah, just being able to talk to the Tisha Taylor, who founded our Black Gay Pride and founded one of the only Black gay club in Kansas City, is just so important. And I want to be able to highlight her voice and her persona whenever I can.
Absolutely. Thank you. Well, that's what this is for. And since you're already talking about who's in the archive, how the archive, I would love to talk about how the archive came to be. So you're originally from Kissimmee, Florida, but there's such a passion that you have for queer Kansas City history. And so can you share a little bit about what brought you to Kansas City, and then a little bit of the origins of BQKC?
Yeah, for sure. I think my story coming to Kansas City really is just a story of like happenstance. Originally from Florida, I ended up going to college in Hoboken at this place called Stevens Institute of Tech. Originally, I thought I was going to be a music tech major, and they had a really good program. Clearly, I'm not a DJ or a producer. But when it came time to graduate, a lot of the time I spent at Stevens. I feel like college, what I majored in was like grassroots organizing and finding myself. I feel like that's really what I spent a lot of time doing in college. And so when it came time to graduate, I feel like I had spent more time organizing on campus than job prospecting. And so I had found this fellowship program that basically matches you with a job in a startup or nonprofit in a different city. And through me joining that fellowship, I was like, okay, if I do this, I'll have a job secured. And I ended up getting matched with a job in Kansas City and moved here. The reason the archive came to be is because me growing up on the East Coast and also like in these large metropolitan centers, like growing up right outside New York and right outside Orlando, when I was coming to Kansas City, I of course had like my own preconceptions of what that might look like. And so my number one goal moving here was like, I need to find Black queer people the second I touch down here, no pun intended. So when I started doing research, just on Instagram and Google, trying to find like Black queer, I don't know, I didn't know what Kansas City was going to offer. So I was like, I don't know, club, hangout space, hiking group, I don't know. But nothing was coming up. There was nothing online. There was nothing in forums. There was nothing on Google except for a Reddit post that was asking like my same question. Like it was like living in KCMO as a Black queer person, where do I go? And the answers were just like, nobody will care about you being Black and queer. You can come to Missy B's or something, which is like a white gay club here. And obviously that wasn't the answer I was looking for. And I'm pretty sure the person who put it that post was looking for it either. And so I had this larger wondering and question of like, okay, what is the prevalence of Black queer people in Kansas City at all if digital media is telling me pretty much there's nothing? So I started and at the time, I was also passionate about like writing, and started like working for this local Black newspaper. And so I was like, okay, I'm gonna like combine like a couple different things and just like start researching local institutions to see what I can find. I started looking at the KC Library, the Black Archives of Mid-America, and there was still nothing. But eventually I called the Gay and Lesbian Archives of Mid-America, and Stuart Hines, the curator, was like, we have some stuff, but not a lot. And the Buddy started special collections. They have like hundreds of thousands of materials. And when I came, the Black queer history they rolled out to me on a cart. All of the material they had was just like
on one cart.
On one cart.
Oh wow.
3 tiers. And the way it was like 3 tiers, there were also kind of like 3 distinct things around Black queer people, and that was it. But it was something. These materials, none of them were digitized. They weren't really finding aids like on the website, and Glamma didn't have plans to digitize them. I was working a hybrid job, the job that I moved to Kansas City for. So I had the privilege of going to the archive during a 9 to 5. But that's the only time the archive was open. So for anyone looking to find their history as a Black queer person in Kansas City and has a regular job, it was already out of the question, you know?
Yeah.
Had to go through a couple of forums, and then I was able to sit with the material and look through it. And in these materials, they included like some of the first like documented, as what I'm calling it, because there may be more, Black drag queens of Kansas City, and an organization called Men of All Colors Together, which was this group of gay men that were like addressing racism amidst the gay male community in Kansas City. And this public access cable program called Out There that aired in 93 and 94 on American Cablevision, which I think is really groundbreaking, just like this LGBT cable program like on TV that people could watch, specifically for the purposes of fighting this anti-gay legislation at the time. And it wasn't inherently Black and queer, but there was one person on it, Leah Hopkins, who is a Black lesbian, founder of the Kansas City Pride Parade, who had a segment on the show. And I thought that was especially important because it was already groundbreaking in and of itself. To have a Black lesbian have a segment on the show, that was even more like, period.
Yeah.
After I did that initial research, I expressed, I have like these pain points of navigating the archive. I started to like do exhibits of these materials and get connected to and kind of find like my own, wanting in the beginning of wanting to find Black queer people. I started getting connected to like the underground ballroom community. Particularly what was the insider was in the last bit of my research at Glamma. I pretty much finished all the material. I just wanted to look through a couple more things before I was like, okay, that's it, I guess. There was this ad in a magazine, a periodical called Casey Exposures, and it said Soki's, and in the banner at the top, it was like Casey's only Black gay bar. And I was like, what is this, I asked Stuart Hines, the curator of Glamour, but he didn't really know anything about it. Of course, I had went and Googled and tried all these synonyms of Black, queer, Kansas City, but have never tried Soki's. And when I put that in, there was still like nothing. But there was one hit from this article written by Starla Carr, who was one of the inaugural collection shareholders to BQKC. It was a publication in the Hip Hop Dance Almanac about like her childhood and growing up in hip hop. But she talked a little bit about Soki's and it being formative in her like coming of age years. Yeah. She had her Instagram linked, and basically I just messaged her, and from there it was like whirlwind. Like it led to the creation.
Opened up the floodgates.
Of BQKC and finding all these elders and seeing the materials they had. And also a lot of the materials like being on the brink of like unexistence. Like a lot of them were water damaged, yellowing, torn, held together by tape. But still rich and beautiful story of this Black gay bar Soki's. And also so many other stories that they have to tell. And also just hearing their pain points and dealing with like our local institutions, particularly Glamour and the Black Archives. And I just felt like I was in this position of like where I have the resources and the privilege to be able to share this story. And so I decided to start the Community Archive BQKC and just really try and make an archival project, process, and science that was really specific to the Black queer community here in Kansas City and what they need. And that was a long story, but that's how it started.
Full of great history, great information. And I mean, look how it's blossomed in just, it's been like two years? How long have you been in Kansas City?
Yeah, I moved here in 2021, and the Soki's article came out in December 2023, and that also marked BQKC as the archive starting. So yeah, overall, it's probably been like 2+ years.
We'll be right back after a short break. And we're back.
The archive has only been in operation for like a year.
I want to ask about, you mentioned collection shareholders. Can you talk a little bit more about what that means? Because you're working a lot. One of the pillars of the Black Ordinary Project is autonomy. And so I'm really curious to hear about how you're maintaining the autonomy of these living icons whose lives are so intimately reflected in the archive. So talk a little bit more about how you're helping them to maintain their autonomy over this collection.
Yeah, for sure. I think that this collection shareholder process is one of the ways I'm referencing, and like this is very specific to how the community is in Kansas City and our elders still being alive, which I think is so important, but I think adds a layer of like, I need to be intentional. And so this shareholder process, when I was starting the archive, a big pain point that I was hearing from the elders, it's a couple things. I think kind of backing up a little bit. So Soki's, the Black gay bar, opened in 93 as kind of a partnership between like this Italian mafia, the Italian mafia, the Black queer community. So Soki's used to be an Italian sandwich shop that opened in the 1970s in downtown. And there was a Black bar that opened during the time of Soki's, the Italian sandwich shop, being up. And so just the way community functions, some Black queer people started going there, and then they told their friends, And so it started becoming a pregame spot for people before going to this Black straight bar Connections. Around the 90s, the owner of Soki, Salvatore Ronaldo, was getting ready to shut down the sandwich shop. And because he had kind of formed community with the people who were coming to the bar, these two Black gay men were like, hold up, don't shut down the bar. What if you just turn this into the spot instead of making it the pregame spot? And so these two Black gay men, Eric Colston Eric Robinson and Jerry Colston made a proposal basically saying to turn this into kind of a black gay bar nightclub at night. And Salvatore was like, do it. He was just like, you just have to fundraise for everything yourself. And from that, Soki's kind of became a sandwich shop during the day and a black gay bar at night, which is really interesting. But I'm giving this background because in 2004, downtown, the city had contracted Cordish companies to make this huge development project, the Power and Light District. It was $800 million. And this development project pretty much forced all the businesses out. It caused like displacement. And so from that and shutting down Kansas City's only black gay safe space, only black gay bar ever, I guess to our knowledge, especially when black queer people have poured resources into that. 20 years later, there's still fragmentation in the community. And I think that that's really important in how I conduct the archival work is like, I really need to center the history itself and how I'm working with the shareholders, because to this day, they're still experiencing like the ripple effects from that and how that has like shattered their community. And also like they poured their own money into that bar and they have nothing to show for it now. So that's important. Going forward now, when I was working with the shareholders, a big pain point they expressed in working with GLAMA and the Black Archives, and just like institutions like PBS, it's just like a lot of these people will come to the Black queer community and, you know, they have financial resources, they have staff, their staff getting paid, but they're coming to the Black queer community to do what they got to do for their job. But these Black queer people who they're getting their stories from, they're not getting paid, they're not being compensated, they don't really have agency over how their stories are being told by the archive, these institutional archives. And so I felt it was important, like, not only do I need to be like mindful of the history, I also need to make sure that as living folks in the community, they're being recognized for their time and they have ownership like in their story. So this collection shareholder process basically is this licensing model I created, like through a mix of like trying to think of like, like shared ownership, abolition, and thinking about like how that plays into like archives and institution and community archives, and also like working with some pro bono lawyers. And this licensing model basically says that like these three shareholders of the archive, Gary Carrington, Tisha Taylor, and Sila Carr, were able to like loan their materials to me to be digitized, and all their materials were returned to each person, so they get to keep their materials. And also, too, this licensing model just means that they're giving me a partial license or right to be able to tell their stories, but Gary, Starla, and Tisha remain the intellectual property holders and copyright owners over their material, which I felt was really important.
That's incredible.
So yeah, I feel like the model has been really successful and important. And especially as a community archive, I feel like it has also allotted me, like on a personal level, I don't have like AC AI unit library monitor system to be able to like keep those materials in whatever system. Still want to be able to teach the elders on how to be able to keep the materials safe, original ones. But it allows me to mainly function as a digital archive and basically freeze these items at a moment in time and have them in the digital space, hopefully forever, you know? And so I feel like it provides like pros in that way as well. And yeah, on top of that too, because these owners are like living shareholders and I'm like have created like intimate relationships with them, it's not just about thank you for the material, see you when I see you. I talk to these people regularly. I just had to chat with them last week about like this exhibition that this institution wanted to do. around Black Gay Pride, and we had like a conversation together about what that means, what that looks like. Are we sure we want to do this? And the answer was no. And period. We're not
Period.
doing it.
Yeah.
So on top of like the shareholder thing, I've been able to like raise enough funds to be able to compensate these elders for contributing to the archive. So I think also too, like each of the shareholders was given a stipend of around $600 for licensing some of their materials to the archive, not even giving. So I think I'm trying to set precedent as well, that if my little community archive can compensate our elders for taking their time to do this, for damn sure PBS, UMKC, the Black archives who have resources can compensate folks for giving up
Absolutely.
their material to these
Yeah.
institutions.
Absolutely. A lot of institutional archives work on a donation basis. And so once you give them your stuff, really don't see it ever again unless you make an appointment to go and see your own materials, right? And so you are setting a precedent for the way for a model that can be used collectively and a way forward that really gives people credit where credit's due, and lets people remain owners of these histories, which is absolutely incredible. You mentioned something about an exhibition. Can you talk about BQKC's not necessarily transition, but I think collaboration in these artistic spaces? Of course, I'm sure people are familiar with the way that archives maybe display their work in an exhibition style, but the way that you've been able to collaborate with different partners in the Kansas City area is really unique in that your archival material then becomes art and is installed in an art way. It was just installed in an exhibition at a really prominent gallery here in Kansas City, Charlotte Street. And so talk about that, and then also talk about these non-traditional art spaces that it's been in. I know you've collaborated with different minority-owned coffee shops here in Kansas City and displayed the work that way. And so just talk a little bit about those collaborations.
Yeah, I think that has been like the funnest part of all this. And it's like interesting because it's like the way I started doing the artistic exhibitions is because I was just like trying to make it do what it do with the little resources I have. But I think that like speaks bounds about like people who don't have like resources or the privilege that these institutions do and are able and have creative skills, artistic skills to be able to do like awesome things, but just don't have the resources to. But anyways, off my little tangent. So the reason that the exhibition started was, so at Glamma, I kind of wrote like 3 articles on the research that I mentioned, like the Black drag queens, men of all colors together and out there. And after I published those 3 articles, like in the digital space, I was like, okay, this is important. Now when people Google Black queer Kansas City, something's going to come up. But I didn't want that to be it, I wanted there to be like some sort of like in-person engagement dialogue with the material, especially since we're just, well, let me not say coming out of COVID. We're still dealing with COVID, but in-person connection is definitely fragmented. And yeah, so much of like my own starting this journey was because I couldn't find Black queer community myself. So I'm just like, how do I take up space like in an interesting way that like Black queer people were here and spark conversation like that and make space when there wasn't space, Yeah. So I came up with this idea like in the beginning of 2023 to do like sort of altars at like 3 low barrier to entry locations. I basically just wanted to pay homage to the Black queer people in the research that I had done. Most of the people in the materials had passed on except for Leah Hopkins. And so I felt like it was important to create some sort of like commemorative altar, like really like spiritual, but also informational,
Sure, yeah.
And so there were 3 altars, one dedicated to Edie Gregory and Ray Rondell, one coffee shop. I can't even remember which coffee. I think that was Black and Brown, which was a Black bookstore in Kansas City. Quincy X. Sykes, who was a leader at Men of All Colors Together, and that was at Cafe Corazon. And one to Leah Hopkins, even though she was alive, I felt like it was important to just have an altar to her as a living legend at PH Coffee. And like these altars were just ways I just talked to each of these like locations. And I knew these locations from like the little bit of time I had been spending in Kansas City. I was living in the Northeast, so the PH was like easy for me to Northeast Kansas City. So PH Coffee was a place I had frequented. Black and Brown and their own quarry was someone I had formed community with. And I really enjoyed Café Corazon too, and I feel like it spoke to my Afro-Latinidad. So it just like, the collaborations just like happened like naturally. I just like spoke to them and told them that this is what I was trying to do, and if I could have space here to do some like week exhibit, and they were like, yes. And then to make it happen further, I collaborated with like a print shop to do like special prints and like raise sponsorship funds just through like some orgs. Again, it's all relationship building, like just orgs that I had met and like was asking for help in making this happen. And thankfully, everybody was like on board and excited about it, and the yeses were coming through, and the exhibit was able to happen. Since then, I feel like definitely my goal with the archive is to create like these public art like installations or exhibitions. I Especially because again, so much of like the pain point is like people don't know Black queer history in Kansas City because the community is like fragmented. And because like these institutions are not really trying to provide resources to the community in return for telling their story of plight and struggle. And so now I'm like, okay, I can create like these exhibitions and not put them like in this highfalutin gallery. I can just put them in a coffee shop, and like someone can just come visit this coffee shop in the morning.
Yeah. Well,
see this exhibit.
You're bringing the archival material to the community rather than
right
holding it to yourself and expecting the community to seek you out. I think that's a really wonderful way of working in the archival field, in the archival world. And it's just a testament to the way that you're so rooted in community-based work, and truly community-based work, right? Like owned by the community, ran by the community, experienced by the community. And you're just doing a really beautiful job of it.
Thank you.
We'll be right back after a short break. And we're back.
So what have you learned about working in these non-traditional ways? What have you learned about being in true community with these shareholders, with these organizations, with these community businesses? What are some lessons that you've learned?
Yeah, I was just talking about this morning with a friend that I'm trying to make in Kansas City, and so much about this work is being relational. Like, especially right now, the times we're in, like, we're just not gonna survive if we don't build power and we don't build relationships with one another. And the biggest thing I have learned through all this is like, none of this work would have happened without having relationships with people. Just like I was talking about right now with the exhibitions, none of that would have happened if I didn't go to Black and Brown and just be like, hey, Corey, what's up? Like, I'm trying to get to know you. Or if I didn't like form a relationship with Blackout a little bit and try and get to know them, and loop them into the work. For sure, there wouldn't be material if I didn't sit down with Gary, Tisha, and Starla and tell them like what my vision is and what I'm trying to do and how I'm trying to build with them. But even beyond the work, it's like I've gotten to know these people on a deeper level, and like I think that we're like having conversations, you know, about our future and like what that looks like. And I think that this is kind of going into the next, well, I guess it's like a subset of the lesson I'm saying is like the intergenerational like community building is like really important, specifically in the context of Kansas City, where we can readily see in the history this fragmentation. Black gay bars shut down. Elders don't really have a way to be new people in the community, so that connection isn't happening. And so I feel like I want to be able to use like the archive and this history to be able to foster those connections. And that's like something that I'm seeing and has been like an important, I guess, in the ways of a lesson, because it's something I want to like bring out more as I continue this work and being relational. I think something else that's important is just the work began as a passion project, you know, like as a side project. And I think that oftentimes like money can corrupt, you know, and we see how like institutions like they operate on mainly a donation based giving. And I feel like that's an important thing I've had to really challenge like my own understandings of business, especially as a young like 20 something and just like diving into the like nonprofit world and stuff, and like seeing the ways in like which nonprofits function and oftentimes have to extract to make like their work happen as well. And like really like check myself and see like what I want the future of this to be. I really don't think I want this to be a 501c3. I don't think nonprofit is on
That's fair. Yeah.
the roadmap. I think that the space it's living in right now has been good, comfortable. Everybody feels safe, and I don't want to create a dynamic where that starts being agitated, because for what? Like I don't see the point in trying to like profit off of these people's stories, you know?
I mean, American
like,
culture is built upon like bigger and better and grander and more money and more and more and more.
Right.
Yeah, and what does that mean to just be content with where it is, where it feels safe and where the work and the people are protected? And I think that's really important.
Right. And so, especially this past year, oh my gosh, I had to deal so much with that. And I just, but you said, I want to be able to make sure that this is like not only a safe project, but a fun project. And the ways that it's growing right now, it's growing for the sake of community. It doesn't need to grow for the sake of having the bells and whistles of accounting and staff and like, no, thank you.
Yeah.
So that's a big lesson. And then I think the last thing is just, we have to be archiving, and archive can't be a passive process. It has to be
Ooh, yes.
a really radical,
Say that again.
intentional process. Archiving cannot be a passive process. This process of just like wanting to like collect and own means nothing. Like if you're just collecting and owning material and not making it accessible to the community, you're not building power with it, you're not trying to repair harms to our community with it, then what's the point, you know? There's no point, to me at least, beyond just offering it to academics to do research and like do their own papers for their own interests, you know? And that's not moving us anywhere. Praxis will move us places. And so I think archiving must be an active, radical process. But I say that specifically because if I hadn't got into the materials when I did, and you can see in the archive that like the way I worked with a local printing press here to digitize the materials, we made minimal, if no edits to a lot of the materials. We did it as is and put it up as is, because that's really like the feel I wanted to give to it. That's how the material was. So I feel like that's how people should see it, you know, because I feel like it tells an even larger story. There's one photo I really love from the archive, and it says this person in the community, Danny Cashmere, is standing in front of the bar serving alcohol, and it's like has a sign that says like Long Island iced teas, 2 for like $6 or something. Wish that was still a thing today. But he's like serving alcohol, but the picture, it's like ripped in half, and there's like a piece of tape like holding it together, and it also has like kind of like some fraying, like damage, like in the corner and stuff. And that's how it looks. And period. I want it to look like that because I feel like maybe subconsciously it's telling people like, oh crap, like these materials about ready to go, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, if we're not super intentional about forming community with our elders and hearing their stories, those stories are gone. My great grandfather just passed away a few months ago, in November. And I have, I keep thinking about all the stories and conversations I'll never be able to have with him now because he's not here. Like the only way I will be able to like ever learn more about him is maybe through a photo or a document or whatever. And the fact that this is a living archive, I'm like cherishing that even more because I'm seeing it show up even in my own, personal
Sure.
life. And that I won't be able to have a conversation with my great grandfather, so I'll never understand from his words what certain things meant to him. And so that has definitely been, I think, the biggest thing out of all of this is just like I really want to be able to capture people's stories.
Yeah. Well, first of all, my condolences.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, but then,
Not to put a damper on things.
no, 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 no,
But...
no. It's important that we speak the names of people and tell people's stories. That's what this platform is all about.
Right.
So thank you for sharing that with us. I want to talk too about what you said about it's important that people see these items as they are, because I think there's like a tangible memory there, right? Like somebody had to take the picture, somebody had to pose for the picture, somebody had to take the picture, somebody had to print the picture. Then you're seeing, oh, well, at some point the picture got ripped. At some point somebody tried to repair it. Like there's so much history just within this one object that is really important. And so I love the fact that you're doing the work to preserve the item, of course, like over time, but you are presenting these items and these archival materials as they are and not modifying them in any way. And I think that's really, really great.
Yeah.
Sure.
So much of this work too has been that like it's not even like just like looking at the photo and be like, oh, this is dope. It's like it really is. Okay, who took this picture? Who's in this picture? What is going on?
Yeah.
Like to be able to like tell a story, because just being presented the photo, and of course this is like the Black queer ballroom tradition. So the photos are beautiful, dope. Drag queens in these like elaborate dresses. A lot of photos of the Black lesbian community, masculine and femme lesbians doing really cool shit and doing pageantry. But that in itself, is not enough. I like want to be able to know like, who is this? What is going on? Who took the picture? And that has been like a lot of the conversation, especially like when I think like Gary's collection is the biggest, and I want to say that's like 50 something things. And so it's like we're going through each one and being like, what is this? What's going on? And also like the cross, like there are some things in Gary's photo album that he didn't know like what is going on. But I talked to Tisha and Starla, and they know what's going on, and vice versa.
Lots of collaboration too, yeah.
Yeah. So that has definitely been an interesting part of all this. And I think to what you're saying, keeping the photos like as they are, like the state in which they're in, tells a story in and of itself.
Yeah, that's what collective memory is all about. For sure. It's everybody getting together and pulling from their memory bits and pieces and then making this big discovery about what history really is. So you talk about abolition, and you do a lot of abolitionist work. How does abolition relate to archival work?
Yeah. I think so much about abolition is about dismantling institutions, obviously focused on prisons and the carceral system, but I really think it's like a framework for how we dismantle institutions. And funnily enough, I want to think about how far I want to go into this, but Kansas City,
Go for it.
our pride, a lot of the money, pride here, you have to pay to get into like this area of pride, and that's not something that's typical of other cities, you know. And so that money is going a lot to like permits, fees for like renting the park, but also to contracting police to be there to be security for Pride, because it's like ordinance or whatever that if you're gonna have an event, you have to contract police to come out, you know? And so a lot of these things are connected expressly. They're not like abstract concepts. And so abolition in connection to the archive, so much of it is about, you know, dismantling the institution, and how I create like this community archive that is really based on community want, community need, and not replicating institutional archival science. But also, you know, not being a cop. And
Period.
a lot of the material, of course, being Black queer people has to deal with, like, for example, like sex work, you know? Someone's not about to tell me their story and I'm about to go to the police and be like, this person was once a prostitute, you know? Like, it never gave that. But I think, like, more seriously, it's about like the valuation of people and community over police and over profits, and like really being super intentional about how the money is operating, like with the archive too. And so, yeah, I really view abolition as like a framework, like for how I've been like operating the archive and like looking towards like becoming abolitionists like Derek Capernaum, and Miriam Kaba, interrupting criminalization's work. I think a lot of this too is it started as a journalism project. It started as me releasing a series of articles, kind of like almost investigative journalism, archival research. And like in order to do those pieces, that is also dealing a lot with like white journal standards and codes, and like how I'm not, you know, a propagandist, how I'm I guess reporting on like these different pieces of history and using a Black lens, a queer lens, a feminist lens, an abolitionist lens, and that all has translated into how I'm operating the archive today. But yeah.
We'll be right back after a short break. And we're back.
I do want to transition, if it's okay. I didn't tell you about this part beforehand because I wanted it to be off the dome. So I apologize. But I want to, this is like a rapid fire buzzword section, right? Okay. I'm going to list some words and I just want you to tell me the first word or phrase that comes to your mind when you hear the word. You know,
Okay, I
don't
feel like I'm
overthink
a Cosmopolitan or Teen Vogue.
It's gonna be great. Don't overthink it. Here we go. Art.
Accessible.
Archives.
Community.
Autonomy.
Sharing.
Kansas City.
Local.
Okay. Queer.
Black.
Abolition.
Destruction.
Kissimmee, Florida.
Rainy.
Community.
Queer.
Collective memory.
Word.
Revolution.
Future.
Liberation.
Future.
There we go. Great.
You really caught me off guard with that one.
Good. I gotta keep you on your toes. I do.
Yeah.
I do. So the Black Ordinary is a resource hub. And at the end of each podcast, I want to invite guests to share one or two book titles, either books that you've written or books that you've come across in your work, things that relate to the work that you do in the community. They will be included on the digital bookshelf that's going to be available on theblackordinary.com. Are there any books you'd like to share with our listeners and viewers?
Okay, yes. I think that is it okay if I share three? I'll just talk about
Yeah,
them
as
really
many as you want.
quickly.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to just do three because I was gonna try and do two, but they're like for real three that I feel like
Yeah.
were formative as I was doing the archive. First, I'll say is Pedagogy of the Oppressed by Paulo Freire. I started reading that book when I first moved to Kansas City, and like, just of course, masterful. It's a classic. Um, and so much of that has informed how I'm thinking about this work. Like, how am I constantly, especially when it's like historical work and a lot of sharing stories. Okay, how do we apply action in this? Like, where's the action? And so I'm constantly thinking about that, and also thinking about how I teach these people, and it's not just depositing the information. Like, how are people also getting like active with me about the history? You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So that has been really important. Uh, The War Against All Puerto Ricans by Nelson A. Dennis. Um, that I'm Afro-Boricua, and so that book, of course, is like super important to me. But the reason I mentioned that book in connection, like with this archival work, is because I feel like Dennis just does like this masterful job of like immersing myself, like immersing the reader into the historical work. You would think like you're reading some fiction, whether it's a work of fiction or like a novel or something, but it's like actually like what happened in Puerto Rico. Um, and I want my work to be able to like craft the same feelings for folks. I want people to be able to feel like they're at Soki's, you know? I don't want it to just be like a lecture, like 19 whatever this happened, stories on bullet points. I want to be able to create that experience for folks, and I just really love that book. And then finally, I think Audre Lorde's Zami. I was also reading that book during the time of me founding this archive, and just like her telling like this story of like her coming of age, just like her life story. And I think she calls it like a biomythography too. And so I think like that's like really interesting to me, and how she presents like this like historical record, but also like I guess like leaving like bits and pieces and questions around her calling it a myth, you know?
Yeah.
Um and I think it challenges me to think about like what are the ways like I'm being accurate, and making sure that people are getting the information like they need, um, and also like leaving space for people to ask their own questions when I don't know the answer. Maybe even the shareholders don't know the answer, um, but people can like fill in and like what they think in their own context. You know,
Yeah.
we're not guesstimating dates or anything, or like what the name of Soki's was, you know, but uh giving people the time period, who was there, the music they were playing, what they did, and then allowing people to, you know, think about the more nitty-gritty aspects.
Yeah.
But
Sadia Hartman, who's a scholar who works in archival research, and she's a writer. Are you familiar with her work at all?
yes.
So her concept of critical fabulation is exactly what you're talking about. It's like looking at archival material and kind of piecing together the gaps, to kind of fill in these stories about what we think that these people might have experienced, kind of bringing that to the surface. So I want to congratulate you on, first of all, have you ever just sat and like realized that you have now cultivated the community that you did not have when you first arrived to Kansas City? Like, have you sat in that, like, have you really like felt that, you know? Like, that's incredible.
Yeah. Sometimes it feels, it's like shocking at times, but other times I'm like, it's necessary, you know?
Yeah.
And I feel like Kansas City kind of gives sometimes like startup, nonprofit, bootstrap mentality and like wanting to be a leader type stuff. And I recognize that like I put in the work and was able to see the fruits of my labor, but I didn't go into it with that, I went into it with like
Curiosity.
I'm curious and like, what do I get out of this? And it is manifested into this. And I think that's beautiful. And I relish in it. And I just hope that it continues to grow and blossom in cute ways. And ultimately, I just hope that future Black queer folks, whether from here, transplanting or whatever, if they come to Kansas City, they won't be in the same position I was. They'll be able to put something in Google and something will come up, and know that like people existed here and there's a long legacy of Black queer in Kansas City.
Nas, will you let our listeners and watchers, viewers, what are they called? However you're engaging with this, will you let them know how to find you, how to connect with you, how to even engage with the archive?
Yeah, so the archive is launching its digital database later this year. Kind of towards the end of the year, we'll be launching a static and a dynamic site, so stay tuned for that. In the meantime, a lot of how I'm sharing the material is through my Instagram at 1-800-NASI, 1800-NASI. You can also find all of the articles and research thus far, and also images from the exhibitions, even merchandise I've created for the archive, like commemorative like prints and a bandana. On the Kansas City Defenders site, it's kansascitydefender.com/BQKC. The archive recently became an independent community archive from the Defender late last year, which is exciting as well. So in the meantime, that's where folks can find all the research and the materials, and then it'll be moving to the digital database later this year. And on my personal Instagram, I have links to all the things like research articles I've done, a newsletter, all that extra cute jazz.
Sweet. I know you got like a community, what is it? On Instagram, they have like these like,
channel.
Not chat rooms. Yeah, the channel. Yeah, that's what it's called.
So I have that too, where I drop like things here and there about my process, or even asking folks like what they want to see like coming up. But yeah.
Thank you so much for your time and your expertise. This has been a wonderful conversation. I wish you the best. Stay hydrated. Stay Black. Stay safe out there. And I look forward to all that you're going to do in Kansas City, but also beyond too.
Yes. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for inviting me on your platform and doing such intentional work.
Absolutely. You're welcome back anytime.
Period.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the Black Ordinary podcast. The Black Ordinary is a grassroots project dedicated to uplifting the collective memories of Black America. You can find QBKC in our collective memory database on our website at theblackordinary.com. For more art, archives, and autonomy, you can also follow us at The Black Ordinary on Instagram and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Stay Black and stay blessed. See you soon.